All right. Live on YouTube and go live on Instagram. All right. I managed to do it right this time. What a miracle. Welcome aboard, everyone. Another impromptu live coming from me, AB. My name is Shan, for anybody new. And today I have been working on a presentation. Frank, what's up? I'm working on a presentation, Frank, for the Kayak Adventure Series. I want to make sure I do a good job for Drew. He invited me to speak. They're going to be down in Ocala next month, really. Well, February, I think. So I haven't decided I'm going to fish or not. Maybe I'll fish, maybe I won't fish. I look at those things as like networking opportunities to meet folks. So if I get into fishing mode, I'm not going to meet and talk to anyone. I'm just going to be fishing. So I'm kind of up in the air on that one right now. But I'm definitely penciled in to do a presentation. So I thought, and I'll take any ideas for anybody who might be coming down, any information you'd like to see that I could possibly cover. But they're going to be working out of Ocala down there and having everybody meet in Ocala. And you're right along the Ocala National Forest, which is where I live. Kind of live in the middle, the north middle of it. Good point, Frank. You know what though, man? I didn't fish in the last one, but I did fish a little bit. I just didn't fish in the tournament, and I had a great time, man. I met some good guys. The dude who owns the Yak Gadget, I fished with him one day, and got to meet a lot of people in town. You know, set up a booth, and I just gave them away, the relative weight stickers. It was a pretty good time. 6 folks, welcome in, everyone. So I'm working on a presentation. And of course, there's 600 lakes and ponds in the national forest, not to mention the rivers. You've got Lake Panisofsky over there. You've got Rodman behind my house. You've got Orange Lake will be in play, I think. It's an interesting setup because you don't have to fish in one lake. Everybody can fish where they want to fish. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how I've been locating fish in the river, although I'm not very good at it yet. Certainly not a professional at that. And I also thought I would talk about the differences that I've noticed between basically northern and Florida fish, or fishing in Florida is quite different than fishing anywhere else on the planet, really. It's very unique. In many ways, in an uncountable number of ways. So I think the first thing, and I grabbed some lures too, so we can just do some visual aids here, and a couple things I want to talk about. So I'll throw this out there. Have you guys fished with these things yet? Make sure I get in the screen right there. You seen these things? I saw them at the store, and I think they've got something in there for like forward facing. Oh, I thought I opened this one already. Where's the open one? Oh, here it is. So they're 3.5. Oops. They're plastic like a worm. Definitely reflective, aren't they? Thin, flat. I'm assuming you nose hook that on like a, what do they call these things? A fox thumb. One of these, maybe. I got a weedless one, like a drop shot type of situation on that. I also thought you could probably rig two together or drop two in a line and drop shot them that way. I also thought like a free rig would probably be death. You get it to hop and flutter. Anyway, if you fish these weird looking things, let me know how you're doing that, because I'm interested in that. So next lure, or the first lure, I guess, about Florida is just old school and cool here. I picked this up with from Clun, from Rick Clun. It's his popper. It's got his name on it right there. I got both sizes, and I'm just going with Clun on the longevity of it, and the fact that he's been professionally bass fishing as long as I've been alive. I'm going to trust that his popper is probably pretty solid. I have a hard time casting it because I don't want to lose it. I'm quite proud of it, but the popper. You hearing good things about the what is that thing called again? It's a Panorama 3.5 is what they're calling that, from 6th Sense. I like 6th Sense. I like them even more than I know that Ben owns it. I didn't know Ben owned a piece of that or all of that or whatever. So we'll promote 6th Sense a little bit more since he's my friend. And I've caught plenty of fish on their baits. And I got a problem here. All right. So top water. I brought the popper out. Name drop Clun. Why not? Got to meet him. Got to meet his wife. Very nice lady. I made an absolute idiot of myself when I met her. I didn't know who she was. So when Rick, I was actually standing in his tent. It was very hot that day, even though it was early spring. And I just wanted to be in the shade. I had my camera. I was all set up. Got some shots, for the page and everything. And I asked this nice lady. I said, "Do you mind if I stand in the shade?" And she said, "Not at all." And I was just taking pictures. And you remember that? Yeah. So dumb. I think I asked her. He came out. He looked like he was about to have a dang heat exhaustion. He had been out there all day in it, and she's looking at him, like a nurse practically. She steps back. He starts signing autographs and talking to people. And I said to her, "It seems like you know Rick Clun personally." Like an idiot. She did. It's his wife. But no, I had a good time with them. And actually, I get some likes on the page from Mr. Clun. Got one the other day. And if that's not a really just like proud moment, super proud of that, to have that a hero like him follow your page and participate it's a great feeling. Yeah, Josh, I was tossing my idea around. That first thing that came to mind was drop shot it. Just drop it down there and basically shake it right in their nose. I could see that working. Also being able to work it a little more slowly in the winter with a drop shot. You can drag it a little slower, bring it back a little. Now, I will say this, since I've just mentioned my differences in northern and Florida fishing, even in the wintertime, speed is better. For me anyway, adding a little bit of speed to the lure. So maybe a drop shot's not the best idea. So that got me thinking, all right, what else am I going to do with it? Well, I thought I could Texas rig it. That would be, you go to the bottom, I'd snap it up, and then get that fall. But then I thought, a Texas rig probably isn't the best. Probably a free rig. That would give it a real unique fall, a real unique look. And then if it was castable, I would just like to throw it up because they're just into the surface and work it, like just kind of let it pop it a few times and then let it fall when the fish are up on top, busting and knocking those shad that are falling out. You can't tell me. I know that thing would be death at Lake Lanier. I could positive I could fish with that thing out there like that. But it's just a little bit difficult out here, the way you have to cast long distances. It's shallow, so typically you're casting further away and not being able to get up over the fish like you can at Lanier. Yeah, I like that idea, Josh. The little twitches there. I just saw these. Where was I at? Oh, Dick's Sporting Goods in Ocala. So I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to do some experimenting with that. Hopefully, somebody will throw some ideas out there. Let me check the click over to the Instagram side. Maybe there's some folks talking over there. I got one comment in here, a double digit on a fly rod. Yeah, man, that would be awesome. I've caught a lot of fish on fly rods. Back in the day before glide baits, I bust out the big streamers, get custom guys to tie you up some foot-long streamers. And I was using them on an 8-weight way before glide baits, and they were death, man. They would hammer them. And I've got an 8-weight. I need to bust it back out, get the streamers back out. Maybe I'll do that this week. Monday and Tuesday are going to be my days to start firing it back up. I got some time, so I'm going to hit it pretty hard those 2 days. We're in the pre-spawn right now in Florida, and the fish should be just, I don't expect it to be gangbusters bite-wise, but we should get some good bites. And actually, I got a report about a week ago that a 13-pounder was caught about 500 yards from where I put in. So that's motivation. Yeah, I hear that, Josh. But yeah, the old school fly rod trick is not a bad move sometimes. I busted that same thing out over at when I was fishing at the Kayak Adventure Series on the shoal bass on the Flint River. I actually took my fly rod, and that was what I landed the fish on. I did some spin fishing as well, but I only caught spots on the spinning rod. And the only shoalie that I caught was 18, but it took a big fly. It took a big black saltwater fly, which was a nice fly too, because it had like this strike indicator foam thing in the back of it, but a lead head in the front of it. So when it hit the water, it had this really slow descent, and it really kind of looked like a hellgrammite. And I think that's a good bait for them, hellgrammite. I'm not an expert on shoal bass, but anyway, next surface bait. And I say I'm going with the surface baits first because I'm not much of a surface bait fisherman. I don't like the top water, mainly because back in the day, the only frogs that were available sank real fast and weren't real good at hooking up. Frog fishing's come a long way since I've made, since I was a kid, but I've always held a bias towards it that I feel like I don't know. It's a psychological thing. There's nothing wrong with fishing on top. But that being said, this guy I think is going to be an absolute hammer. You know who that is? You know who makes this dude? I like his face. He's awesome. That's Mike Buca's mini rat. He gave this to me before it came out. Yeah, I think it just came out, and I've only been able to talk about it for a little while. But I believe these are for sale now, so I can talk about it. But I like you can replace the tail. You can get in there and and change that color if you want to. But it's like a wake. It's like a little wake rat. And again, just a different profile, terrestrial profile, but that doesn't hurt my feelings at all. If I'm going to the surface, and I like that rat too. it really you could really rolls like it doesn't blow out. You can really move it quick, and I've noticed that in Florida, speed seems to be important. Yeah, I could see where a split shot would work with that, Josh. Definitely. So we got our two top waters. Of course, you could just go completely old school, buzz bait it. I think that would be fine too. Top water fishing here is fire sometimes. I see guys doing it a lot. The frogs are very popular, and it's because of the vegetation. The mats are just so dense and thick that it's easier just to fish, not even let it sink. Just fish it up on top. But there's also an opposite technique to that called punching, where you get like a 1 ounce weight and an 8-foot rod. It's like you know, like sawing down a tree and just using that for a rod. And you're just snatching, dropping heavy plastics down through, and you let it go to the bottom, and then you bring it up and tap under the mat, and then you drop it about midway down. There's really no wrong way to punch, I don't think. I'm not a huge fan of punching. I will do it if they're biting, but it can be slow and tedious. You have to have the right mindset. You're going to be working little spots all day long, just working and working and working. But it is good. I have caught some. I do a little punching with the old 5.8 bellows gill. Use that quite a bit, and I'm going to rig it. I'm going to bring a bellows gill with me this week and rig it the way I used to. I haven't had a great deal of success this way with it, but on your I like these bladed hooks. That's a 5/0. Screw lock's important with G-Crack. I also like the rubber stopper that comes all the way on it. That's going to help you a ton. But the main reason I picked that guy up was the shape of that blade. I've never really seen. Let's see if I can get it to turn around. It's a diamond kind of a blade. But anything different, anything just a little bit different in Florida, I think is important. I'm going to click back over, make sure I'm not missing anybody's questions on Instagram. We got a lot of people coming in and joining and leaving over there. I don't see, just figured out how to really use it over there. No questions over there. All right, cool. Which brings me to my next bait. Probably going to throw a little bit around. Had some good luck on the chatter. I like the bellows gill. I like the bellows gill. I got here with a trailer on jigs and chatterbaits because they're flat. I'll hook them through and bring them like that, and it keeps the chatterbait from rolling. If you get it in sticks or on weeds or whatever, it won't roll as much because it'll kind of set on that flat side, keep the hook up. And I've gone to that little. I think this was the 3/8 bellows gill on jigs and chatterbaits, and I like it as a trailer. It's a good bait. And then finally, the one bait that I used to not fish, just usually in the wintertime when I for the northern fish, but has become like I've got a rod dedicated to it, and I don't take it off in Florida. Jerkbait, fast, high speed reel. I got my jig reel, high speed, no playing around, absolute smoke. You can't move it fast enough. As soon as you slow it down or stop it, the Florida fish will just ignore it. If you get it back to the boat or something, forget it. You better hope they eat it before you stop it, because they ain't having that thing stopped. They want it moving. And that's kind of the idea I'm going to bring to the presentation. And of course, we're going to break down some of the water and stuff like that. But just in general, I think slowing down around here is a mistake. Not to say that you shouldn't. Of course, I'm gonna a little bit, but most of the time when I'm having a hard time in Florida fishing, I'm going with more speed and catching more fish. I also picked that up from Mr. Klun when I met him. He was selling some spinner baits. I don't have one laying here. I'd show it to you. But I made a post about that, and he responded to that post. And that I was talking about slow rolling blades, and he does like to slow roll them, but he specifically pointed out that they should be burned as well. And I started doing that in the fall. Well, really all summer and into the fall. After he told me that stuff, I've been messing with it, putting speed on spinner baits, and really I've had the best luck on like the pads where you've got kind of sparse, not heavy pads, moderate pads, but where the spinner bait can deflect off of them, and you just bring it through like a freight train, and they will smoke it. Absolutely. Yeah, man, the chatter, that's the big blade too. It's the Z-Man. It's the largest blade. And I me, I tend to scale up. Oh, I wanted to bring one other lure in here. Oh, here's another lure that works good coming through. Talk about burning. If you're ever down here, Gambler. Have you ever heard of Gambler? They're Florida. They make, this is the biggest one. It's like this giant paddle tail fluke, right? And I hook it with a belly weight. So it's with this hook without the blade would be fine. This hook with the blade would be fine, actually. These guys would be fine with it. So it's top hooked, and then you just throw that up into the pads and burn it at the surface. Just wake it and bring it through, and it does a really good job. They've got that, and they've got a frog too, and I've done good on the Gambler frog. So Gambler, something to think about. If you're in Florida and haven't heard of them, you might want to look into some of their baits because they're pretty good. I've had some good luck on them. Yeah, you got Gambler up in Canada? That's cool, man. I'm pretty sure those dudes are out of Florida. Yeah, Pompano Beach. And that particular bait right there does a really good job in the same way I just described, pulling it through the surface, basically waking it, burning it, letting the vegetation deflect it. Seems to work the best for me. Flipping, that's a good question, man. I don't think so. 316 Lure Company frog. Hold on, I've got a couple frogs in here. Let me make sure I'm not lying. No, I think this is the 6 cents frog I got right here. Isn't that what this is? Doesn't 6 cents make that one? It usually says on there. Hey, you know what else I got? I got these 40 new readers that aren't tinted. Look at me go. I don't see where it says 6 cents. This might not be 6 cents. This might be a Megabass frog. I think it is. It doesn't have 6 on it, and it usually does on 6 cents. Yeah, do send me that, man. I would like to see that. And actually, one thing I'd like about frog fishing is a jumbo, just a huge frog. I haven't seen one big enough. Zoom has an old one. I remember they got like a jumbo frog. It's okay, but I'm talking big because I'm telling you, man, we have got Frogzilla. When the frogs fire up around here, man, it is like stupid. They are huge. Welcome in, everyone. We're just talking about bass fishing in Florida, but I'll talk about whatever you want. If you got a question or something, you got a pond. I know I had a couple of dudes had ponds that signed up as subscribers, and I certainly appreciate that. I kind of expected that was all this page would ever turn out to be, but it's not. We talk more about fishing than we do about anything. Oh, there comes text from Alex right now. Let's kick it back to Instagram real quick. No questions over there. You Instagram folks have any pond questions, I'll be glad to answer them. So yeah, the subscription page is well, I just really anticipated doing everything on subscription and not doing so much, as a consultant. But there's just very few people who pay the subscription. Thanks to everybody who does. Certainly appreciate it. It keeps us going here. But it just didn't work out that way. So yeah, that Spro Frog, that's what I'm talking about. I've got one right over there. Mm-hmm. And you know what I'm going to do, man? Because I already called it on myself, right? I'm biased against them. So what you got to do is just go to the lake with frogs. That's it. And don't bring any other lures. If you're going to go fishing, you're frogging all day long, and just grind it out. I don't think that's a bad technique for here when it's right anyway, coming in the springtime. And learn that way. I used to do that all the time at work. Because when you go to work on lakes, you're going to a lake every day, so you can fish every day. But one, it's a job and you got a lot of gear and stuff like that. So bringing fishing gear was even more. Two, you end up breaking a lot of your fishing gear because it's at work mixed in with that kind of tackle. So you don't have very good stuff. And then I don't know. I just started after maybe a decade of fishing every day. You start challenging yourself, start doing different things. And one of the different things that I would do is just bring like one or two lures, and if I lost them, well, then you're done fishing. But forcing myself to fish with things that I normally would never fish with is the point. Oh gosh. What's the weirdest thing someone has requested for a pond? Um, you know, let's see. There's been a few. I had a guy one time live near the coast wanted to know if he could keep redfish in there. In Georgia, smallmouth bass won't even work, Josh. We can't grow smallmouth bass in ponds, and I don't know how good they even reproduce in northern ponds. I just don't have that much field experience with smallies. Where I worked, we just didn't have them. I would say that I'm gonna think about that for the weirdest. The guy who wanted the redfish, that was pretty weird. I couldn't help him with that. And he thought he could do it because one of the small places he fished would have redfish in it. It looked like a pond, but it also had a large culvert pipe that connected it to brackish water, which is how the reds were getting moving in and out of that place. There was also not very good fishing around freshwater fishing around a bunch of bull drum in basically a pond. They were they were less than healthy for all the other fish in that little entrapped area. That's what they were doing in that entrapped area. It's just hammering. But the red drum, I don't know about that one. I laughed at that guy. I'm trying to think though. I've never had anybody request gar before. A lot of crappie, which I don't recommend doing. They want crappie ponds. A lot of people want to stock the pond just completely incorrectly. If they want bass, just for example, they only stock bass. And that's not how that works. They don't understand that there's an entire food web that you need to set up for the bass to feed on. I have seen people do that though, where they just put bass in the pond and all the bass get about 6 to 8 inch and they stop growing. And then they'll be so starved that they will be jumping out of the water trying to catch like dragonflies and stuff flying by, catch things out of the air. It's pretty sad, really. But I don't know. I've had a lot of kind of off weird requests about pond management, and then that just becomes a teaching moment, and no different than what we're talking about, where if you don't understand the basics, you're not going to understand it when it's complex, right? So that's why we do the pond stuff. Like we've been watching fish grow 2 pounds a year for 2 years now because it was set up right. Lakes can get that kind of growth as well. Now lakes are going to be a little bit different. They're going to be a little more complex. They got more competition for the same bait. It's not just a pond with bass only as the predator. And I think guys just don't get that. Like they just look in the water and see bait and assume it's unlimited. And it is not unlimited. If you see the post today where I talked about zooplankton, everything drives off that. All right, you got phytoplankton, that's the plant, like algae type plankton, and then you got zoo, animal type plankton, little kind of, for lack of a better term, bugs drifting around, floating around, eating each other, and little plant type planktons. That right there is the base of the food chain. Or put another way, more plankton, more fish. Less plankton, less fish. There's a direct correlation between the measurement of density and plankton in the water and the numbers of pounds of fish per acre. All right. I didn't say there's a measurement of the number of cattails in the water or water lily in the water or hydrilla in the water. I didn't say that, did I? No, I did not. You hear me? The measurement of plankton, microscopic plankton in the water. So you dip it out and it just looks a little green. You're looking at plankton in there, and then we can measure that. And that tells us how much fish can be held. Now, that doesn't mean the fish are going to be big. Let's say we dip the plankton out and we say, oh, wow, what a plankton enriched environment. There's plankton galore. There's more plankton than any other place in the whole world. But we go stock it with 250 bass per acre. All right. They're not going to grow. I know because I've watched guys do it. They didn't stock. Well, some did. Some stock more than 250 per acre. So I've seen guys stock 1,000 bass per acre from criminals who stock fish for a living. You get the exact same thing I just described. A bunch of small bass that are starved out, trying to eat anything. Doesn't work. On the flip side of that coin, I have guys say, hey, man, here's your money. Grow me some trophy fish. Okay. So I'll go stock the lake. I'll get it going. We're growing trophy fish. We're a couple, 2-3 years in, like about right now. And then things start slowing way down. Fishing's pretty good for a few years, but fish start getting bigger. They start seeing a lot of lures, start getting a little resistance to them. They're already in super low density because we intentionally put them that way so they grow really fast. And all of a sudden, they're going out and they're going for not only not getting bites, they're not even getting bit. And they think something's wrong with the lake because they equate good fishing to good fish growth. And that is actually opposite of one another. If the faster I crank up the fish growth, meaning the lower numbers of fish per acre, lower numbers of bass per acre, the harder it's going to be to catch those fish. That's just a fact. So when I set up a true trophy fishery, and it's usually about third year, fourth year, sometimes dudes are like, I don't like this. I'm not catching anything. And yeah, you can go out there and electrofish them and show me some big fish and everything, but we can't catch them. We need we need something different here. And you end up, adding a few more, not harvesting, whatever, add a few more fish per acre. Now their catch rates go up. Now they're happy again. But in the back of my mind, I know you're making it harder to bust 10 pounds because the plankton is limited. Therefore, everything is limited All the food, everything. There's not an unlimited supply of food for them. Well, there's, and you laugh. I mean, he says it jokingly, skill issue, right? There absolutely is a skill issue because I can tell you with 100% certainty, the rich boys that hired me can't fish. All right. Captain Surgeon, Mr. I make all the money on the planet, ain't no bass fisherman, son. They're not. They just not. And they don't possess, not only do they not possess the patience for it, they don't possess the mindset for it, they don't possess the skill set for it, they don't possess any, again, they live in a world where they get everything quickly. They got their money, they got the flash, they got all that, they get everything. Nobody even blows back at them on anything in their entire life. Nobody tells them no about anything. I mean, these dudes, I've worked for all kind of cats, and you're absolutely right, and that ain't a joke. It is a skill issue because I've never met a rich dude that was that much of a grinder. Not much. They'd rather spend $5,000 and sit over a deer feeder and shoot a big buck than go out in the world and work for it. And that's just how it is. But that's absolutely right. It's a skill issue. Not even skill, even a mentality. You're not going to beat me no matter how many days I get skunked. That is the mentality you got to have to be a true trophy bass fisherman. You got to be able to get skunked 30 trips, 40 trips. You're going to skunk me the rest of my life. I don't care. I'm going to fish the rest of my life for no bites if I have to. That's the mindset you got to have. If you don't have that mindset, you will not be on the water long enough to catch anything worth of crap. Oh, my man James has got a good question. He's got a few local ponds, and how does he convince the pond owners to let him fish? Well, the first thing I'd recommend is you always ask permission. Don't be the guy who trespasses and goes on somebody's property and then begs for forgiveness, because you're not going to get it. I can assure you that. Again, rich people do this. It costs a lot of money. It would really be insulting to go, it's almost like theft, really, taking someone's private fish like that, in my opinion. But I would just knock on the door and ask. Now, I have directed a few folks to the page. You can say that you're a fisheries student, a fisheries connoisseur, you are an amateur scientist, and you can provide them with some catch data. You can provide them with some recommendations. Now, these are the things that I'd be telling you to do. I would be saying to get myself in the door. I can identify your weeds. I can give you recommendations on how to control those weeds. I can do some consulting. I can be, a positive influence that'll save you some money. That's the angle that I take on it, and it works usually. It's very rare that somebody owns a lake and once they know who I am, won't let me look at it. Now, I've been there. Some people ain't letting you on the property. It didn't matter. You could be Jesus Christ yourself. You ain't going in. But that's kind of the approach that I take on it. Just tell them the benefit of allowing a guy like you who, understands fisheries management to fish there. And that's right, Frank. We're going to be doing some hook and line assessment today. We're going to make t-shirts. We're going to get some merch, hook and line. Yep. I hear you on that, man. And, I don't I've managed ponds, for quantity, and if you look at public lake management, that's kind of the way they're forced. Their hand is forced kind of that way. There are definitely I'm starting to see the state kind of, diversify Some of the lakes are being managed for bigger fish in Georgia anyway. Now in Florida, it's kind of, well, it's just kind of they're just kind of here. They just kind of occur here naturally. Not to say that the biologists, don't have lakes to manage. They certainly do. But like where I live on the Ocklawaha River, my Lord, I don't even know. It flows all the way back to Orlando, and it's so much water. It's ridiculous. And with the diversity of species and in the river, and of course, like with snakeheads and blue tilapia, there's certainly some challenges with competing fish in Florida. There's all kinds of fish that aren't supposed to be here now, and that's only getting worse. That's a big thing too. Like if I stocked your pond, right, and we set it up and it's cranking right along, and then all of a sudden it really does go out, and like the fish, we're getting bad relative weights, we're getting bad fishing, things, something's amiss, right? Every time something like that happens, dudes will be like weeds or habitat or any number of wrong answers, right? It's usually not those things. It's usually competing species. It's usually crappie where I'm from, or green sunfish, or a combination of both. If you had good fishing and it tanks, I'm looking for what other fish mess that up. And now secondarily, I'd be looking at maybe you let a weed problem grow out of control that messed that up too in a pond. That's another thing people don't get. You can have too many weeds in a pond. It can kill it. Plants use oxygen at night, and they can take all the oxygen out and suffocate your fish. That's why biologists have to spray weeds. We're not doing that just for fun. You got that right, Frank. Florida is an invasive species capital, as far as I can tell. And it's certainly not helping the bass fishing. And so that's the point that I'm trying to make, though. Like, I'm here in Florida. I'm listening to all these people talk about the good old days when all the bass fishing was great. And they're pointing the fingers at the FWC. They're pointing the fingers at like everything that's not the problem, right? I have never heard anybody say, wow, I wonder if the blue tilapia or the snakeheads are affecting the bass fishing. I've heard me say that. I've heard nobody else say that. And it's like, that will be the first place that I would look based on my experience. You got a problem with competition. Another perfect example. You go out behind the dam here. The hurricanes blew through here back to back and just flooded north central Florida. They were going to drain the lake for weed control, but they do that about every 4 years or so. But they had to cancel it this year because of the flooding on the backside of the dam. I'll do a video. I'll do like a reel about this, a short video, and talk about it, because this lake, the Ocklawaha, flows to the St. Johns River. The St. Johns River flows to the ocean in Jacksonville by the stadium. So it's huge, and it goes 300 miles. It flows north out, from south to north through Florida, and actually goes out in Jacksonville, exits at the coast there. Okay, so that water level behind the house changed about 8.5 feet after those hurricanes. So you could literally stand under the docks down there behind the dam and fish, and you'd be fishing out of the water, like 8-9 feet out of the water. Now, when the hurricanes first went through, the water was right up under those docks, literally like just 2 inches under the dock. So like 9 feet of water, when you consider that's going to this, that flows right out to the St. Johns, that's 300 miles. Okay. It just changed the water 8-9 feet deep. Okay. That right there will knock the hell out of the dang eelgrass. That right there will mess up some aquatic habitat. That right there will waste all the plants all over the river, all that habitat. And then absolutely nobody in the state of Florida has said that to me, has been like, oh, I think the flooding is what's killed the plants. No, they're pointing finger right at a guy like me going, you sprayed all the weeds out of the St. Johns River. And I'm like, yeah. And you've never sprayed a weed in a river in your life to make a dumb statement like that. Nobody did that, right? That ain't even possible. That we don't. You need a U.S. Army and pump sprayers, from all of them, and God, in a month of Sundays to do that. That didn't happen. But yeah, changing the surface of the water to extremely tannic and raising the water level and cutting the light penetration out. Yeah, that'll smoke all the plants in the bottom of the river easily. It's actually a really good weed management technique in ponds to dig them out a little bit deeper so the light can't penetrate down. So like I said, man, what looks like common sense to me is not very common. All right, I'm going back over here to Instagram real quick and checking out. Over on IG, we got a cat. I can't read that. I can't say that. Catawba River, I'm assuming. Quality fish, spotted bass are hurting as badly in terms of size, quality, and quantity on the largemouth bass. Yeah, the spotted bass are going to ruin the largemouth bass. That you can kiss that fishery goodbye. You're going to have a bunch of 1 pound spots. That's my prediction. They'll breed the largemouth out. They'll outcompete them. Spotted bass are incredibly invasive, and every single place I've seen them except Lake Lanier, they pretty much ruined. We've had Preston on here. He's a fish biologist out of South Carolina. You can check that live out on YouTube, and he can run down some of his experiences with it too in the field. We kind of agree on that point. That was a good interview for anybody looking for that kind of information. All right. I'm just going to scroll real quick and make sure I didn't miss anybody. But yeah. So going back to having dumb conversations, man, these conversations, like I said, about like spraying all the weeds out of the St. Johns River, and that's just like, and again, a widespread idea. This is not something that just one guy said. Like almost every single person that I've come across in Florida has blamed the FWC for the loss of that habitat in the river. And I'm just like, that ain't how that works, Chief. Not even close. Yeah, Adesto, goodbye. Good, that's exactly right. Kill every spot you catch, and that's it. You want to see it in real time? Go to North Georgia. Go to Lake Chattooga. All right, go to any of the lakes in North Georgia where the spotted bass have been introduced back 20, 25, 30 years ago. The smallmouth gone. Out of Chattooga gone. They're not there anymore. You couldn't catch a smallmouth to save your life out of that lake. It used to be a great place to catch smallmouth. They're gone. It's all spots. They're all dinks too. Guys moving spotted bass around are ruining our native bass. Again, Dr. Steve Sampson is on the live on YouTube, and he touched on that quite extensively. Another real good interview you could check out and watch and learn and spread the word and try to tell guys, please don't do that kind of stuff. Don't transport these fish around. Please try to listen. I don't know. I've been saying this stuff for 30 years to literally deaf ears. I'm surprised there's this many people listening to me now. It's been a real challenge to get guys to listen, even to just the most basic, like fish handling. Like you shouldn't drop the fish on the ground or on dry carpet. You know, you shouldn't touch it with dry hands. If you've worked in a pet store, you've been trained on how to handle fish, you know? So I don't know why there's such a major disconnect. Like even trout fishermen, you know, trout fishermen completely understand like handling the trout is very important. It'll kill them. I think probably because if you don't handle the trout very well, they'll die right there on it. They'll be laying dead at your feet. Where bass, excuse me, are a little bit tougher, swim away and die later, get caught by something else, usually turtles or another type of predator. But I don't know. I'll just keep doing my thing, saying it over and over and over, and hopefully one day it'll catch. Yeah, like Wiley, he's over on Instagram. He's talking about 30-pound bags 30 years ago, 8 to 10 pounds wins the tournaments now to the spotted bass. That's a perfect example of everything I've seen with spots, Adesto. Absolutely. And that's why it's so important we understand these ideas and try to save, you know, what we got left, because you know most of it's gone. It'll be what it is. Robert, this is live. If you have a question for me, you can just throw it in this chat and Instagram, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. Let me scroll back real quick. I'm sure there are, my friend. I am sure there are a lot of bass being thrown around. Yep. That's a good point too. I can bring up about moving fish around. I've seen guys move them into ponds and they don't do good. Thanks, Robert. And I know because I've done it myself. Like I've had a couple situations where the one place in particular pops into my mind. I've talked about several times. We had a gizzard shad and a crappie problem. It's about 40 acres, 35, 40 acres. And I introduced bass. The bass just were getting wiped out by the crappie, and I couldn't drain the lake because the HOA wouldn't let me. So I thought, well, I kind of knew since there was no small gizzard shad in the lake. And I know because I electrofished it, that everything was like 16, 18 inches. And when gizzard shad stun out, they release a pheromone into the water that shuts down reproduction. So I made the assumption that since I didn't see any reproduction, that is what happened. And I also saw a ton of crappie in there. And then the bass that were there were very few, but again, when lower in numbers, huge in size. And there's a decent population of like 6 to 9 pound fish in that lake, but they were almost impossible to catch. Like hardly anybody ever caught one. Every once in a while, a kid on like a live bluegill or something would drag one out of there. But I think I caught maybe 3 or 4 in 10 years of managing the lake before they drained it and redid it. So anyway, they weren't paying me to fix the water or fix the fishery. I kind of took it on myself as an experiment. They just didn't, you know, HOAs won't pay you. They'll pay you to spray weeds. They'll pay you to pick up trash. They'll pay you to test the water a little bit, but they're not going to pay you for the fish. Most of them don't fish. So I had an overabundance of 1 pound bass on 1,500 acres of water in Georgia in the Southeast. Everything was bass stunted pretty much. So I had plenty of 1 pounders that I could throw in there. So that's what I did. I had to pull them out of other lakes anyway. So I took the ones that looked the best and put them in the 40-acre lake to try to get some reproduction, try to get the crappie chewed down, try to get the bass to reestablish a decent population with all that, and hoping that the gizzard shatter live about 6-7 years. And they were so big, I was hoping they were on the tail end of their life, so there'd be a kind of a die off on them, and maybe we would get some reproduction firing back up. And it took a few years, and it took about 6 bass per acre, 5-6 bass per acre, I think, ended up stocking. But it worked, and it came back around. And did it get great? No, it wasn't fantastic or anything, but it did get better. The fishing was better, and the lake was better. I was happier about the health of all the fish in the lake after doing the stocking. But that being said, the bass that I did stock, I tagged, and probably 70% of them didn't grow, even though they came from a bass stunted pond, and they came back into a situation where they theoretically had a lot more to eat than they used to. They didn't. Some of them didn't grow at all. Some of them got a little bit fatter. Now, some of them went in and just bulked right up like the rest of the fish that were in there. But like I said, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, somewhere in there, did not. So transporting fish is not what you think it is, right? Like 60, 70% of the time, the fish that you're moving around aren't even going to grow. They probably live their life stunted. They're probably too old. They're probably on the last leg over there. And you're just moving fish around, burning fuel, wasting gas, disrupting the balance of the other fishery. It's a complete waste of time. If your lake's not producing 9-pound fish, putting a 9-pound fish in a lake isn't going to help it. That 9-pound fish is going to turn into a 7-pound fish. Do I need to repeat that? Putting a 9-pound bass in a lake that doesn't produce 9-pound bass isn't helping. I've only watched guys do it for 30 years. It doesn't work. You have to create the environment for 9-pound bass to grow. Just stocking them in there, it's not how this works. Back to IG. Let's check some questions. No, largemouth and spots do cross up, and the spot is the dominant gene. So you get a hybridized fish, and then you'll get basically a pure spot on the next reproduction, and they'll just spawn the bass, the smallmouths right out like that, the largemouths right out like that. They mix with each other like that. They outcompete. They're just nasty all the way around. They're not sterile. Dank, what's up, man? Appreciate you. Okay, Robert Parrish. He says, what creates a big bass lake and not a farm pond or bass pond, but a public body of water, specifically largemouth, specifically northern strain? Forage to depth, the size. Well, you're talking lake, so it's over 50 acres. If it's 40 or 50 acres and under, right around there, is considered a pond. And a public body of water, it has to do with any body of water. All right, we can use the pond as an example to the lake. We just have to be aware that a lake is more complex than a pond, right? But we've been watching the fish grow in our pond for 2 years, and they've grown 2 pounds a year, and we've documented that. We also know that I stock 40 bass per acre, and we also know that it's been fed. And the point being is I know I'm supporting probably 350 pounds of fish total per acre, and I know I stocked 40 bass per acre, and I know what the growth rate of those bass is. So what I'm getting at is, if you're in a public body of water that's been catch and release for 40 years, nobody's ever harvested a 1-pound fish. Okay. That's not how we do that in a pond. In a 2.5 acre pond, we are already keeping some 1-pound bass out of that thing. So when you've got everybody throwing all the fish back, nobody keeping anything. But then on top of that, you've got tournaments and you've got YouTube fishermen that are catching all the big bass, putting them in tanks and not knowing how to handle them, not listening to anything I say here, and killing the largest fish. You're skewing the entire public reservoir towards 1 pound bass. You're literally trying to grow 1 pounders with the way we're set up right now. And is it surprising that everywhere you go is 1 to 3 pound fish? Because everything's skewed that way. You've been managing the lakes that way. So it has nothing to do with the depth. It has nothing to do with the size. It has nothing to do with the brush piles. It has nothing to do with the weeds. It has nothing to do with any of those things. Okay. All those things are secondary to fish population balance. What I just described, 40 bass per acre in a pond in a good situation. Now, maybe think about it this way. You move that to a public lake, right? Down the street from that lake, 40 bass per acre is going to be too many because you've got different fish in there. Maybe you got bowfin in there. Maybe you got crappie in there. Maybe you got walleye in there. Maybe you got chain pickerel, northern pike, whatever else you got in there is going to be reducing that number of 40 bass per acre down because they're eating the same things. So maybe now for a trophy bass fishery in a public lake, you can only support 20 pounds of bass per acre for them to grow properly. But the point is what we're looking for. The one thing we're looking for is relative health on the bass, and it's written all over them. It's right here, and it's why we talk about it all the time. This little chart, you see that 12 to 13, a 12.5-inch bass should weigh 1 pound. This 12 means a 12-inch bass should weigh 0.9 pounds. A 13-inch bass should be 1.1. All right. So if I pull up to a public lake and I pull a 1.5-inch, a 13-inch bass that weighs 1.5 pounds, it's wearing a sign that tells me that's a big bass lake. If it's the opposite of that, if I pull up, and it doesn't even matter which one of these fish I catch, if I pull up to the lake, I catch a 16-inch fish and it weighs 1.8 and it should weigh 2.2, I know I'm in the wrong place. I don't have to catch very many fish to prove it. Does that make sense? Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, Desto, but I find sugarcoating is pointless. I'm going to let that one marinate because usually when I say stuff like that, there'll be some questions following it up. So yeah, that's what we have to think about, the complexity of it. Like it's simpler in a pond, right? And we have no competition in the pond. So we know we can go 35, 40 bass per acre and get good growth. If I add competition, like say crappie come in, that's a kiss of death for my bass growth. That's going to take my bass from 110, 120% relative weight down to, like 80, 88, 85. It's just going to knock them in the head because the crappie are going to be eating up all the bluegill before they even hardly have a chance to become this big. And crappie are devastating predators. And how I get the 120, if anybody new, let's go back to this example. Let's say it's a 12.5-inch bass, and I said it should weigh 1 pound in between this 0.9 and 1.1. Be right, it would lay on that line, and it'd be 1 pound exactly. Well, if I caught a 12.5-inch bass that weighed 1.2 pounds, and it should weigh 1, if you divide the 1 by 1.2, you get 120. You see how I got that number? It's 120%. We multiply by 100 and make it into a percentage. But just understanding that basic calculation that there is a standard weight for bass and that's it. There's a standard weight for all game fish. That's not just bass. You can get them for crappie. You can get them for bluegill. I got them actually over there. Pike, muskie. I think they got all of them somewhere. In Fisherman ran an article about it about 10 years ago. They had them all listed out. It was a nice list. But, that's how I recognize public water big fish. public water that produces big fish. So Robert says he's catching a lot of 22-inch fish in the high sevens. So let's pull out the chart. Let me flip it back over because there's a little bit of time delay. So we come out here to 22, 6.2, right? So if you're catching them 7 pounds, that's a heavy fish. You're in a good place, right? Now, the fact that you're catching 7-pound fish is a tip that you're in a good place, right? But again, I see a lot of guys that are out here on this end of the scale. Oh, I'm catching 7-pounders that are this long, 24 inches long. Okay. That's in terrible condition. Okay. That's not good. If you're seeing 24-inch fish that are under 8 pounds, that's not good. There's a problem. There's a limit to the forage base for the larger fish. That's another thing guys don't get. They look down and see a bunch of 2-inch fish on the edge and think the 9-pounders have plenty to eat. That ain't how that works. Some 9-pounders are not going to run a marathon to eat an M&M. All right. They want to knock down 1-pound meals. They want big, and they'll stay alive on that little stuff, but they won't grow on that little stuff. You got to have a good mixture from small to big and mostly topped out on the big side for big fish. If you don't have large forage, you have a good population of big fish, but an insufficient large forage base, you'll see those bass get limited out, just like that. The standard weight for 24 Adesto is 8, but I don't like saying that's what it should weigh because I've seen them weigh 5.5 and I've seen them weigh 12. All right. What they should weigh is this is just a frame of reference, right? It's not what it should weigh. It's not a good way to guesstimate a fish's weight. It is once you do some measurements, once you've measured, say, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 fish out of the same body of water, you're going to start seeing the patterns in the data. And I highly recommend you write these numbers down because you won't see those patterns unless you do it. Yeah, Robert, it's northern. It doesn't matter. They're the same. This whole Florida bass being a different species is only about 5 minutes old. And I've got in the example pond, we've got Floridas and Northerns in the same pond tag so we can tell them apart. And actually the Floridas are growing about 1 pound a year slower than the Northerns. They're not as aggressive. They don't eat as much. And I've watched that for years. It's also close to the North Georgia mountains, and where you stock Florida bass is critically important. I've seen Florida bass grow at faster rates, but it's in the coastal plain, not up in the mountains. And I did all of this stuff. I've done this for so long. I'm covering all my angles. You see, I've been talked down to in every kind of way about this for 30 years. So when I came back on covering every base that I could possibly imagine somebody would ask me. And that was part of that stocking strategy, to differentiate the different genetics. And I've actually never been had the technology even available to me to do that kind of project. So this is the first time I've ever run Floridas and Northerns in the same pond against each other and been able to differentiate between the two. Now I have plenty of times stock Northerns or F1s, and then somebody want pure Floridas, and I've been able to differentiate from like a pond, like from that pond to that pond. Like it seems like the Northerns or the Floridas aren't growing as fast, but then there's a ton of factors besides genetics that may have contributed to that. So this is kind of the first time when I've been able to run them side by side. And it's still showing exactly what I've observed all these years. It's like where you stock Florida. The only difference is that Florida fish are warm water bass. They don't really like cold water because they evolved in Florida. And they are a freaking hassle when around fronts, man. These things, we've had stable weather for a couple days. It actually got a little bit warmer today here in Florida. It's 80 degrees today. I think it's going to be 70 the next couple days. And I have done better. And that's another good point to add to the thing we're going to do for Drew on the Kayak Adventure Series. stable weather patterns tend to do a little bit better in Florida, for me anyway. Yeah, Josh is making a good point. How to differentiate between fish in the river and fish in the lake. You can see that in Georgia a lot. The fish in the river, like sometimes rivers will be stained coming in, and the fish in the river will have a completely different color. Their color will shift compared to the fish in the lake. So you'll see differences in the color, but you'll also see differences in the weights of those fish too. On those big public reservoirs where, if you're 20 miles to the south end of the lake or way up in the river, 20, 30 miles away, you will see weight differences in relative weight from the same body of water. They're pretty drastic. But you also have to consider 30, 40 miles away, just because it's in the same lake. That's different environments, Yeah, I hear that, Josh, man. I'm glad it's helping you out. That's cool. Let me go back and check the gram. A 25-inch DD is rare? No, man, it ain't rare at all. I've seen plenty of them. Actually, 25 is about as long as you to bust DD in a pond. You're going to need 25-inch fish. You won't usually get a 24 that heavy. You'll see a few, but they're real rare. But a 25-inch, let me put it to you this way: I've seen a 26 that goes 13.1. So a 25 that goes 12 is not. I've seen that several times. That's not out of the realm of possibility for growth. To say that's common, that you are making a correct statement, and that is a rare fish, especially in public water. But in private water fisheries where it's managed and you got a lake, 25-inch DD is pretty common. You see a lot of 25-inch, 25 and a half. In the 25-inch, maybe not exactly 25, maybe a little bit bigger, but that's a doable weight, I guess is the best way to put that. That's an achievable goal. If you ask me for that, I would tell you we're going to need fish that get 25 inches long to bust 10 pounds. It's really hard to pack enough. You got to stock them so low to make them that fat that it goes back to, you can lose the balance of the fishery. What happens is if you don't put the bass population in there to where they can feed down on the bluegill population in a pond, the bluegill will the bluegill are brutal. First of all, the bluegill are not friendly fish. So the bluegill will be nest raiders on the bass, and they'll eat the bass eggs up when they're in overabundance. And so if there's just so few bass and there's so many bluegill, that the male just can't guard its nest, and its nest will get raided, and you'll lose your bass population. So to avoid that, we have to have a certain number of bass per acre. And again, that's going to depend on, in a pond, 30-ish, 25 to 30. Once you drop under 25 bass per acre, now you better be really good at your job. It's not a plug and play thing at 25. You need a guy like me looking at that. You go to 35, you're going to get awesome growth, and it's going to be more on autopilot for you. Like I could stock it and come out there a couple times a year and help you manage it. And then once you get above that, you're getting into the numbers part. You're really not managing for big bass anymore, in my opinion. You're kind of doing kind of like for a kid or something, like a kid's pond where they would be able to catch good numbers of everything, and kind of like a public lake where people can catch good numbers of everything. That's how public lakes are managed. Usually, most of them. 12 pounds at 23 inches. That is a beast. Holy crap. Yep. Well, there's your proof right there. 12 pounds at 23. They can get extremely, extremely heavy. And we can measure that. It's an easy measurement with the relative weight. And then we know in those places like that, go measure all the other fish in that lake where that 23-inch 12-pounder came from. All the fish in there are going to be heavy. Maybe not as bulked up as that one, but you'll see that pattern. You'll be like, wow, there's a heavy 3-pounder and a heavy 4-pounder and a heavy 15-incher, a heavy 16-incher, a heavy 17-incher. Let's put it that way. Each size class, that's how I break it down when I'm looking at the data. What do the 12-inch fish look like? What do the 13-inch fish look like? What do the 14-inch fish look like? So on and so forth. Well, I don't see too many other questions, and we're running about an hour. I'm going to cut this one a little bit short tonight, guys. No more on Instagram. Hey, thanks, Instagram, for tuning in today, being patient with me, trying to figure this out. And no more on here. All right, so I'm going to cut it off right now. I appreciate it, fellas. I think we're going to try to go back on Sunday. No, what is today? Today's Saturday. Nah, we'll go back on midweek. How about that? Right after the new year, maybe Thursday. Try to plan something for them. I got a couple cool guests I want to bring on and talk to us some more about stuff that, that I don't have much experience with. That's another thing too, man. I don't like guys who make like they know everything. I'm seeing some of that floating around, and I ain't that dude. I can promise you that. I do have some experience. I've been doing this stuff for a long time, but if you can't look across over there and see that there's another guy with some different work experience that you can learn something from, man, your ego's jabbing you up. You don't want to be like that. You don't want to be like these guys. Oh, I go fishing. I don't need to listen to this guy. Yeah, you do. You can learn something from anybody. And one more quick check. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Desto. Thanks for all the questions over on Instagram tonight. Appreciate you, fellas. And that's it. I'm gonna wrap it up. Oh, one more new comment. Make sure. Oh, thanks, Josh, man. Appreciate you as always, brother. And Frank, thank you, and everybody else. Appreciate it. And I'll catch you in about a week later.